Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Specialty diagnostics company Nasdaq-listed Precipio announced its COVID-19 strategy and its intent to contribute to the battle against the ensuing worldwide pandemic. Joining me to discuss is Ilan Danieli. He is the CEO of Precipio. Ilan, it's great to have you with us at Trade Talks.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the COVID-19 strategy, tell us about Precipio and what a special diagnostics company is.
Sure. So we started the company almost 10 years ago, and our mission is to battle the problem of misdiagnosis. So several of my co-founders and myself have had either first or secondhand experience with the problem of misdiagnosis. And we just felt that in the 20th century, that's unacceptable. And so we started a company to deal with this largely undiscussed problem of mistakes in diagnosis. And so we started with a focus in cancer. And in cancer, we focused on blood-related cancers simply because those are the ones where the highest rate of misdiagnosis happens, because of a large number of mistakes, and it's a complex disease to identify. So that's our specialty, is focusing on blood-related cancers and really making sure we get the patient the correct diagnosis.
Tell us about the recent announcement.
Yeah, so we've been working for a while to look at how we can contribute to this, COVID pandemic as a player in the healthcare community, and we identified two areas in which diagnostic companies can assist. One is the virus test, and the second is the antibody test. And we felt that the antibody test was really the one that is going to give a long-term picture of the patient's health and ability to actually return to normal living and economy, because essentially the antibody test can give an indication on the person's immunity to the virus. So we decided to focus on that test and find a way to bring it to the market in the most broadest scale possible.
This might sound really trivial, but what's the difference between a virus and an antibody test? Does one mean you either have it and one means you did have it, now you are safe from it? What does it mean?
Yeah, no, it's not trivial at all. And the amount of confusion in this area is incredible. So thank you for the question. The test for the virus is a test to see if the person has been infected with the virus. So the answer is positive or negative. Either they have the virus or they don't. That doesn't mean they're sick, okay? Because we can also, many patients, as we're now more and more discovering, are asymptomatic. In other words, they have the virus within them, but nothing happens. Most all of us get infected by the flu during the year several times. Doesn't mean we're sick all the time. Some of us get sick at some point. Maybe you've, the combination of being infected by the virus and also being outside without wearing a hat on a cold January day, and you catch the flu, and then you have runny nose, etc. Those symptoms now mean that the person is sick. So that's the virus test. It only shows whether the person's been infected or not with the virus. Once the body's been infected with the virus, several actions begin to happen, including the development of antibodies. So the body learns what is attacking it and develops a defense mechanism. And that defense mechanism stays with the body long after the virus is left. And so in theory, that connotes immunity of the person to that virus. Now there's complexities because virus has different strains, et cetera. So, medicine is not an exact science, and there's many variances and many exceptions. But as a whole, the idea is if the body has been infected with the virus and developed the antibodies, your body has now developed a protection mechanism for being infected again.
Ilan, how many tests do you think we need, and is it scalable with what we have available?
Yeah, it's a great question. As we mentioned in our announcement, there's various studies and papers out there talking about millions of tests a day. And the reason is that if you think about it, the antibody test is not a one-time test that you take until you get a positive answer. So if I get tested today and my answer is negative, it means my body hasn't developed the antibody. Well, I'm going to want to wait a month and check next month to see if I've now been infected and developed the antibody, whether I have symptoms or not. And so in theory, that is a repetitive test that a person has to take until they get a positive answer, which means the body's developed an antibody, and now theoretically they are immune to it, and then they can stop getting the test, or maybe less frequently. Time will tell. We're learning about this disease every day, as you know. So the numbers are enormous, in the millions, and today's laboratory industry is just not equipped to handle that, that number of tests. So our strategy has several steps to it. Right now, the FDA has approved only tests that are done in the lab. So a patient has to have their sample drawn and it gets sent in the lab for diagnosis, and the lab returns a result to the patient's doctor. We believe that at some point, this is going to be expanded to at-home use, which means you will be able to buy this online or go to a store, buy the test, and run it at home. Many of these tests are very simple to use. They're equivalent to a pregnancy test, if you will. Prick your finger, do a drop of blood, drop it into a cassette, wait 10 minutes, and you have an answer. Of course, there's lots of regulatory steps that still need to be taken, but the nice thing about these tests, including the one that we're going to be offering, is that it is designed by definition to be used either in a lab or as a self-test. So that's where we hope to get to. Our opinion is that's where you can really get to mass scale. When you can buy that in Walmart or online on Amazon or anywhere, and really get millions of these tests into the population's hand, that's what's going to help us open back the economy.
Because that's where I think a lot of the frustration lies. You hear about sports teams that are able to get tests day after day after day, and the results are basically instantaneous. Yeah. Meanwhile, we have to wait 10, 13, 3 weeks to, 10, 13 days, 3 weeks to get a result. By the time you get your result, you could have been infected at that point. It just seems with the technology that's available, and we're seeing it happen with professional athletes, why can't it happen in the home, or at least not 2 weeks to figure out if you have the virus or not?
There's no reason it can't happen. I think the FDA is rightfully so taking a cautious stance and gradually vetting these tests as they should. It's also important to note that a test that can be run in a lab is not the same as a test being run at home, and there's many mistakes as safety issues that your regulators need to take in hand when a person is pricking their finger. That may seem simple, but you have to make sure that it works at a high degree of accuracy. It's also important to make sure that the individual doing the test, because they're doing two things, they're running the test, they're also interpreting the result. You want to make sure that they interpret it correctly and don't reach the wrong result. And here's where there's a big risk, for example, of arriving at a conclusion of a false positive, okay? So if you arrive at the conclusion that, hey, I've got, you look at the results, say, I got antibodies. What does that mean behavior? That means you're good to go. That means you can now, take off your mask and, ignore social distancing because you're now immune to the body, to the virus, forgive me. So that's a very dangerous situation where people, shed their safe behavior because of a wrong result. So we have to really make sure that the person can, number one, administer the test properly, and number two, interpret the results correctly.
All right, Ilan, appreciate all the insight. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.